We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Blackwater, it became a household name for work in Iraq, but now Z Services is gearing up for a new mission and potentially some new ownership. Joining us now first on CNBC is Eric Prince, founder and chairman of Z Services. And Eric, you haven't been CEO for how long now?
About a year now.
About a year now.
I've been out of the day-to-day.
Blackwater, or Z, you still deal, I mean, you get business from the federal government even at this point, right? New deals continuing to be signed.
Still heavily engaged in Afghanistan and other parts around the world.
What recent signings for what type of services?
There was some additional security work that was just awarded in the last few weeks.
In the last few weeks. Where does everything else stand in terms of some of the issues that arose in the last 3 or 4 years?
Most of them come into resolution, but you know, at the end of the day, after 3.5 years of an assault by some of the bureaucracy, kind of a proctology exam brought on by some in Congress, it's time to hang it up, because I think some in Washington view politics a lot more important than performance in the field.
As the public sentiment and media sentiment moves back and forth, where are we now in terms of the idea that a firm like Blackwater is a necessary? Maybe some people don't like, you know, what the firm's involved with, but are we back to where people realize this is the kind of thing, it's a dirty job that someone has to do it?
There's a lot of fatigue at Afghanistan. The conflict there is the longest one in American history now. One of the real challenges the U.S. has is getting control of their costs and how to conduct these operations. Afghanistan costs per soldier almost twice as much as it does in Iraq because of the limited logistics flow. So using the private sector to find ways to do things cheaper, smarter, better, the U.S. is going to have to do that. You know, the total military spending in the world, the U.S. spends half of that, and that's an unsustainable number. So you're going to have to turn to private sector, efficiency initiatives if the U.S. is going to be able to project power, help its friends, whether it's hard power or soft power, doing the work overseas.
The Washington Post reports that the CIA has hired Z Services, the private security firm formerly known as Blackwater Worldwide, to guard its facilities in Afghanistan and elsewhere. An industry source who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the deal, which is classified, says the contract is worth about $100 million. The revelation comes only a day after members of a federal commission investigating war-zone contractors blasted the State Department for granting Z a new $120 million contract to guard U.S. consulates under construction in Afghanistan.
This video is intended for awareness for those who may not have a clue about paramilitaries and definitely do not cover all organizations. There are hundreds, and if not possible thousands, around the world of paramilitary organizations. Discharged military personnel make up the majority of Western contractors. Historically, these soldiers are commonly known as mercenaries. However, modern-day private military contractors prefer to call their active staff security contractors, private military contractors, or private security contractors, and prefer to also be known or call themselves private military corporations, private military firms, private security providers, or military service providers. They refer to their business generally as the private military industry in order to avoid the negative stigma often associated with mercenaries. The United States State Department may employ several companies to provide support in danger zones that would be difficult for conventional U.S. forces. The military employs many of them as guards to high-ranking U.S. government officials in high-risk areas around the world. Paramilitaries' purposes are subjective because in reality certain cases are sensitive and not for public information. The U.S. developed a permanent infrastructure for covert action only after World War II. You can decide on your own good or bad. Paramilitary action is one of the most difficult, risky, and controversial instruments of state power. This is not including the fractions of micro-citizen paramilitaries on the rise. Many are titled
Homeland Terrorists.
In the realm of foreign policy, where there are only bad choices, it has often been considered an ideal third option between inactive passivity and the overt use of military force. However, in the U.S. experience, covert paramilitary action has often resulted in spectacular failures, and it also did not achieve their objectives, embarrassing the United States further with undetermined policy and damaged prestige. Columbia News reported on August 21, 2010, former paramilitaries admit to cremating the bodies of 150 of their victims in northern Colombia between the year 2000 and the year 2004. Prosecutors told this to the news agency AP. According to Leonardo Cabana of the Prosecutor General's Justice and Peace Unit, paramilitaries testified that approximately 150 corpses were thrown into ovens and made of bricks and cement. Covert action is legally defined by the National Security Act as an activity or activities of the United States government to influence political, economic, or military conditions abroad, where it is intended that the role of the United States government will not be apparent or acknowledged publicly. A wide range of activities fall under this definition, most of which are relatively mundane. The secret support of foreign governments, the use of agents of influence, gray and black propaganda, supporting foreign political parties and other organizations, and a myriad of other activities can all be legally defined as covert action. This article focuses on a very narrow range on the spectrum of covert operations. The unacknowledged use of irregular military forces in pursuit of political objectives, including the covert support of indigenous paramilitary organizations. This definition excludes individual acts of targeted violence such as assassinations or direct action by special operation units. It also excludes internal court politics, the palace coup, even if they are orchestrated or assisted by the U.S. Most importantly, this definition does not include covert operations that occur within the larger context of overt military operations and declared hostilities. The Uniform Code of Military Justice is allowed to prosecute military contractors who are deployed in a declared war or contingency operation, per Section 552, clarification of the application of Uniform Code of Military Justice during a time of war. It's up to you to decide whether it's good or bad. Just remember, my purpose and intent was just so that you can be exposed.
On the wall, squeezing off. Go Burke, this is Doc. I'm on building 2.
Wow, you got a whole group of them. We got a bunch of bad guys at 12 o'clock, 800 meters from building. Got about 15 of them on the run up here.
Pyro, say again, that location.
Negative, he cleaned them all out.